We're covering a story here today from MMA Fighting. It talks about Gina Carano, ex-MMA star turned actress, overall general sweetheart, who was fired from her job on the Mandalorian TV show by Lucasfilm and Disney. Unfairly fired for right-wing opinions, apparently. Abhorrent behaviour on the platform that was originally called Twitter. We know that that was a cesspool. We know that that was shadow banning people of differing opinions. Pretty much 80 million people that were trying to have a voice in the town square were shut out by the former users of that. And this bleeds into every other single facet of content creation, whether that be movies, TV, music, and now even the UFC. Gina Carano filed a lawsuit last night with the help of Elon Musk, going after Disney as a production company, and you absolutely love to see this. And this is extremely topical in terms of the situation that arose just a few weeks back with Sean Strickland voicing his opinion, using his free speech, and having Disney employees implore their bosses to come for him, to shut him down. We had the loudest voices in MMA media and the UFC in general come out and voice their discomfort with people's free speech. They want it shut down, and if they don't get what they want, they'll threaten to leave. This is a larger picture that we've been talking about in terms of a shift in the Overton window, because for so many years people over on the platform X, now formerly Twitter, were shut out. 80 million people whose voices couldn't make it to the town square were shut down, shadow banned. And when Elon Musk took over there, he vowed to give these people a voice again. And that is exactly what is happening now. And because these voices are spreading loud and wide, you have people, establishment people, that are absolutely hating it. Former MMA fighter Gina Carano has filed a lawsuit against Disney and Lucasfilm claiming discrimination and wrongful termination after she was fired from her role on the Star Wars series The Mandalorian. Carano filed a lawsuit on Tuesday in California's federal court, alleging that she was fired for voicing her right-wing opinions on social media. Just think about that for a second in the context of what we're talking about here. We're talking about MMA, we're talking about UFC, we're talking about Hollywood, right? What's the correlation, you say? Well, if I pop over here, this is something that I dragged up there earlier on, right? Just in case people don't understand the context, UFC reaches groundbreaking deal with Disney Company and ESPN. And you're like, okay, yeah, I remember that. This one could fly under the radar for a lot of people who are just interested in the fights. They don't understand the bigger context of the organization and the message that they want to push. UFC, the world's premier mixed martial arts organization, and Walt Disney, the company's new direct-to-consumer international segment along with ESPN, have reached an immersive multi-year media rights agreement for exclusive live UFC content on ESPN+, as well as across a variety of other ESPN television, social and digital platforms. English, Spanish, taking effect January 2019. So I thought that was important to point out in the context of what we're talking about here. We're talking about Gina Carano, ex-MMA fighter, who lost her job because she held the wrong opinions, apparently. There's no more discourse allowed in the world. It has to be left or right extreme. And unfortunately, if you're on the right of that extreme, then you don't get to have a voice. That is the way it has been for as long as we can remember. And that is the reason why people like Ariel Helwani are so hell-bent on bringing this issue up over and over again. When we hear voices from Colby Covington, when we hear voices from Sean Strickland, Bryce Mitchell, any of these guys who critically think, has to be shut down. Ariel wants us to go back to where we were for the last 15 years, where if you hold the wrong opinion, if you're not all about diversity, inclusion, and all that sort of stuff, then you don't get to have a voice in the public square. You don't get to be part of the organization. I want you to understand that Gina Carano built a 20-year career in the acting business, finally making it to the top of the pile, getting a really awesome character of Cara Dune in Star Wars' Mandalorian TV show. And that gets stripped away from you because you hold an opinion that is opposed to the majority at the time. And we all understand that it's not actually the majority, it's the minority, but they have a loud voice, they're in an echo chamber. And up until Elon Musk purchased Twitter, they were controlling the voice and the narrative. And that consisted of gaslighting and propaganda. Just let's be clear about it. So people that come at me and say, hey man, what are you talking about? Dana White is not woke. He doesn't stand for that stuff. He's all about free speech. I get that. But you have to come at it from this point of view. UFC, ESPN, and Disney are all in bed together. ESPN, Disney, and every other organization that are producers of content, that are producers of music, sport, combat sports, film, you name it. All these companies are compromised. And whether you want to believe it or not, it will leak down into what we love. And in this case, we're talking about the UFC, and we're talking about ex-fighters who move away from this sport, create a career, and have that stripped away from them because of this insane push for identity politics. So when we think about the producers of the content that we consume, whether that be music, film, sport, combat sports, every single one of these organizations or production companies work hand in hand with special impact agencies. These agencies are firms that lobby all the big producers of content. And if we're being kind, we'll say that they encourage, but if we're telling the truth, then they force diversity, equity, and inclusion into every aspect of this content creation. So if you look at what these companies do on a daily basis, they look at the likes of a Disney, an ESPN, a UFC, and they say, okay, your message isn't strong enough here in terms of inclusion, diversity, and they go in there and they reprimand these companies. So when Ariel Helwani said that the higher ups in the UFC weren't happy with Sean Strickland and what he said during that interview when he was asked a got you question by some woke reporter, he wasn't lying. These companies are real. So I pulled up one of these special impact agency companies that actually works with Disney. So these are the people that have daily interactions with Disney, ESPN, and the UFC, if we want to say it like that. These are the people that help brands, non-profits, philanthropists accelerate a positive change in the world. In other words, we don't like what Sean Strickland said. We don't like what Gina Carano said. And in the case of Gina Carano, she could have lost everything. She lost the biggest gig of her career. And if it wasn't for stoicism and that willingness to drive forward and not give up, she wouldn't be where she is today. And you're telling me that these are not the same people that are coming after Sean Strickland? Here we have an article from the Hollywood Reporter. Social impact agency Proper Daily adds 3 senior advisors. A generic nothing burger of an article. But I just decided that I'd highlight this a little bit here. Proper Daily, founded in 2012 as one of the first impact agencies, has strategized with more than 200 clients including Activision, USB, Viacom, John Legend, Kerry Washington, Shawn Mendes, and Disney to build an outcome orientated around social impact programs and leverage culture to create meaningful, positive change. Within the past year, amid the pandemic and multiple movements for racial equality, the demand for corporations to take a stand on systemic inequities and social issues is higher than ever before. So we know what this company is doing. We can see here, look, they work with the Walt Disney Company. Premeditated propaganda. They're forcing it into the content. They're forcing it into our sport. They're forcing it into our music. And if there's any element of pushback or critical thinking, then this person has to be removed and shut down. That's what happened to Gina Carano. That's what they tried to do to Sean Strickland a few weeks ago. So when Gina Carano was hounded to put pronouns in her bio or else, she was threatened that they would come for her. And that's exactly what they did when she responded with bebop boop as her pronouns in her Twitter bio. They came after her disgustingly. She says here that, were my questions about masks, lockdowns, and forced injections okay to ask and push the subject into the light? Should we have been allowed to publicly discuss these topics at the time without being harassed or censored? Absolutely. Hollywood says that they support female representation and equal rights. Why were my male co-stars permitted to speak without harassment, without re-education courses or termination, but I was not afforded the same right to exercise my freedom of speech? And if you have seen any of her interviews in the aftermath of losing her job at Disney and Star Wars, you will know that she was sent on these re-education courses on how to think correctly. You do not question the government when it comes to emergency powers and you gotta take something, otherwise you don't get to make a living. You don't question that. You have to come out and support it. If you don't, you gotta go do a re-education course. She says here that my male co-stars were permitted to speak without harassment. What does she mean by that? This is a saucy one, so I gotta be careful with it. But at the time, her co-star was Pedro Pascal. He would post this. As you can see there, his name. And as you can see, he's alluding to the fact that people that support this movement right here are the same as this right here. That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. You are towing party political lines. It fits the narrative. You're allowed to say that. Gina, of course, wasn't afforded the same allowances because she didn't have the same opinion as you. She had the opposite of that. Her thoughts were that, listen, if 80 million people voted for this down here, then maybe they deserve a voice. Maybe everybody deserves a voice because there is free speech in America, right? That wasn't the case. She lost her job. So that leaves us in this situation where we have Gina Carano, who fought the likes of a Chris Cyborg, who was an MMA star, moved on and made a career. And we have someone like Sean Strickland, who's extremely outspoken. Both of them essentially working for the same agency. She lost her job for holding right-wing opinions. Is that going to happen with Sean Strickland? Is that the reason why, in a very contentious 5-round fight, he didn't get the belt at the end of the day. He didn't get a rematch. Can we ask them questions now, or is it too conspiratorial? Have we not seen enough here in this video to see that and believe that? If we jump over here and we look at this video that I did a few weeks ago, we have this guy here. Don't know his name. Mike Ryan Ruiz, I think is his name, right? He is a Disney employee, which he says with glee and pride in this video. And I also point out all the background stuff that's going on with Disney in this video. So you might want to pop over there and have a look at that, because this company does not deserve the right to stand there all virtuous, let me tell you. So let's have a little listen to him talking about the UFC champion at the time, Sean Strickland.
That is on ESPN Plus. And I know Disney is an inclusive company. I worked for it. Because while the UFC isn't going to do anything about it, I would challenge ESPN to make a public statement on this.
Would you?
Because that kind of hate is going over their airwaves. The Walt Disney Company. What are you, a chicken shit? That you allow this with impunity regularly, but it's never been this vile. Disney's a family company.
Yeah, so there you have it. Disney is a family company. If you don't toe the line with Disney, you will lose your job. Gina Carano got fired from The Mandalorian, and coincidentally, 5 days after Sean Strickland's outburst, and this Disney employee imploring his bosses to put some sort of punitive measures in place, Sean Strickland is no longer the champion 5 days later. I'll let you make up your own mind on whether there's any correlation to be made there. But one thing I do know is that we can't stop talking about this stuff. We can't have Ariel Helwani command the airwaves, command the narrative, and be backed up by people like John Anik and Molly McCann and Ian Gary and all these people talking about toxic trolls and hatred coming their way. What they really mean is people of differing opinions need to be shut down. And for 15 years we had the ability to do that, and we got away with it. And because of Elon Musk, we can't do that anymore. And all of a sudden we're realizing that we're actually the minority, and the majority of people think critically and are not mentally ill. So I hope Gina Carano, with the help of Elon Musk, go after these scumbags as hard as they can. And if nothing comes of it, and you don't get reinstated into the role of Cara Dune, or you don't get some monetary compensation, at least this will be highlighted. At least the people and the populace out there will look at this and know that there is millions of voices being suppressed on a daily basis across all these platforms. This is not an accident. It's premeditated propaganda. And I'm so happy that Gina and Elon are pushing back on it. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hit like, subscribe and share if any of this made sense. Cheers.